Hi everybody, I'm Skip Elsheimer and welcome to the AV Geeks lunchtime streaming show where we watch old 16mm films and think about them, talk about them, comment on them, joke about them, riff on them. And what we just saw was Exotic Egypt, which was a Castle film. Castle films were mostly made and distributed for home use. So anybody that had a projector, 16, Super 8, regular 8, Castle would make something that they could show. So instead of just showing your home movies, you could also show a Castle film, which sometimes would be originally shot footage by Eugene Castle or someone on his team, or it would be something that he licensed. So it could be, newsreel footage, or it could be war footage, or it could be sports footage, stunts. And also he licensed feature films and cut them down. He licensed cartoons and cut them down. So it did what we call a digest, so a little shortened version of it. And the idea was that you could show them, to kind of mix up and generate interest for the whole movies that you're showing. Like, before we get started, here's a Shirley Temple short. And that's what my grandfather did. I remember he had a Shirley Temple film and he had a Daffy Duck film. And they didn't have sound, they just had title cards. And yeah, I remember them fondly. Okay, so behind me I got a scanner, Cintel, Blackmagic Cintel scanner, and we got a film which I'm not 100% sure of the title. The can is labeled Canadian Oil Film. So let's watch. Enjoy.
Roar and clatter of heavy machinery. For here, in a once remote land, known only to geographers and trappers, the final tie-in was made on West Coast Transmission Company's pipeline bringing natural gas from the Peace River district of Alberta and British Columbia to Vancouver and the United States border. Within a man had been put to bed under a protective cover of earth, an invisible river of fuel bringing new energy into the economy of the West. This is the story of how it was built. Pre-route. The story growing industries and populations offered an expanding market. This would need natural gas, and plenty of it. Pacific Petroleum's, a British Columbia and Alberta exploration and development company with associated companies, sponsored West Coast Transmission Company Limited and launched a vigorous exploration program to assure an ample supply. Many areas were investigated for natural gas reserves, and the conclusion was unmistakable. Under the rolling wheatlands of the Peace River district lay an accessible, hardly tapped field of great promise. Men of Pacific Petroleum's undertook it, the largest in the history of the region. Studied cores, seismic crews worked the subsurface, and more drilling rigs dotted the Peace River wheatlands. Showings of gas, then of oil, were located, and all were tested in laboratories. Then, engineers plotted an eminently suitable all-weather route paralleling railways and highways, tying in with a maximum number of communities. Starting in Alberta, the line would pass through the gas fields of Alberta and northern British Columbia, down the center of the province to the U.S.-Canadian border, a distance of 650 miles, avoiding treacherous ground and difficult mountains. With the chief physical problems solved, Canadian and United States government permits had to be secured so that construction could get underway. Approval was granted by Canada. And then, after one plan had been rejected, the Federal Power Commission in Washington, D.C. gave final sanction to a revised plan on November the 25th, 1955. In accordance with this plan, West Coast would sell natural gas at Huntington near Vancouver, Pipeline Corporation, whose own supplies would thus be supplemented in the Pacific Coast states from Washington to California. Canadian Bechtel Limited was given overall responsibility for the management of engineering and construction of the line. Their headquarters for the project were located in Vancouver, where there was assembled an experienced staff of engineers, accountants, material expediters, and all the other special division. Pipeline construction would be done by 5 contractors. Rivers Construction Company would have 117 miles of gathering system in Alberta and British Columbia, and 37 miles of 26-inch line. Dutton Williams would have the northern section of 120 miles of the main line. Canadian Bechtel Limited would have the next 210 miles. Conyers Construction Corporation would have the middle southern portion of 210 miles, and Mannix Limited would have the last section of 110 miles leading to the Canadian-U.S. border and Vancouver. It was one thing for engineers to lay out the route on maps, but before commencing to clear the right-of-way, the entire 650 miles had to be covered on foot in order to pin the location down to exact geographical points. Using charts and aerial photographs, survey parties located the right-of-way and, when necessary, altered the course to avoid treacherous obstacles. Kickoff of Fraser Valley near this concrete column, the only guardian on the boundary between the province of British Columbia and the state of Washington, between Canada and the United States. As a forerunner of the 5 pipeline gangs that eventually would go to work on the line, a spread of men and machines moved into the field in October 1955 to lay a few miles of pipe in preparation for an early start the following spring. And then winter came, and the job was shut down. However, to take advantage of low water, a small crew of pipeliners stayed on to install a number of river crossings during winter. In Coquihalla Canyon near Hope, British Columbia, preparations were being made to lay a prepared section of pipe into a ditch which had been dredged across the Coquihalla River. A section of pipe long enough to span the river was coated and wrapped, and concrete weights were added to hold it down. It was carefully picked up by the side booms and slowly inched over to the edge of the ditch at the bottom of the river. Then, starting at one end, it was lowered in gradual stages until the entire string lay in the trench. In February 1956, clearing of all were fairly compensated for it. The 200,000 tons of high tensile strength steel pipe that would go into the main line was manufactured in England, the largest single export order to Canada in history. Joint after joint of pipe was lifted from the ship's hold and loaded directly onto flat cars on the pier spur. The cars belonged to the Pacific Great Eastern Railway, the line connecting Vancouver with many of the towns along the pipeline right-of-way. Clinton, Lac-La-Hache, Williams Lake, Quesnel, and Prince George. And was heading into north-central British Columbia. Through At Prince George, the end of the railroad, trucks were waiting to take the pipe on the rest of its journey. The first stockpiling was to be at Little Prairie in the Peace River block. And what the pipeliners had been waiting for. When the pipe began rolling in from mills in Canada and the United States, car length were spotted at sidings along the route to be ready when needed. The pipe was 30 inches in diameter, the largest yet laid in Western Canada. Heavy equipment began arriving and was conditioned in temporary yards along the route. Over $1.5 million worth of equipment was needed for each of the 5 pipe-laying spreads that built the West Coast line. Men arrived with their families and set up quarters and house trailers. Nearly 90% of the total force on the project were Canadians. The rest were old pipeline hands with years of experience in Arabia, South America, and the United States. Some sections of the pipeline, double jointing plants were set up. Plants for welding the pipe into double sections to save time in special cases along the right-of-way. The two 40-foot lengths were brought into position, and the stringer bead and hot pass welds were applied manually. Then, the 80-foot lengths were rolled to an automatic round seam welding machine where two additional passes were made. In 7 minutes, the individual joints had been literally blended together so that each seam was just as strong as the steel it connected. Inspectors checked each weld as the sections came out of the machine. Because of the high pressures under which the pipe would operate, every weld had to be perfect, uniformly high standard. X-rays were taken of the welds. Strips of film were strapped around each seam. Current from portable generators made the exposures, which varied according to the thickness of the pipe. Field darkrooms made possible X-ray films. A perfect weld showed as a transparent band on the film. Inspectors could readily detect the flaw if it occurred in a weld and have repairs made immediately. Way was starting. 491 miles made. The renovations. Land agents made access agreements with the individual owners along the route, assuring them that any damage would be repaired, fences would be replaced, and that they would be paid for any crops. In the wake of the brush gang, bulldozers completed the clearing and began biting into the soil to grade and level the right-of-way. Sometimes they dragged rooters, huge plow-like machines fitted with a steel tooth which loosened tough ground. Machines moved in, cutting a trench 6 feet deep.
Okay, that was incredibly splicey. I'm not sure if the owner of this film pulled out clips specifically for his purposes or somebody else's purposes, but yes, there were lots of clips taken out, and yeah, so we don't even know the title of this film. We don't have a heads or a tail, so we can't really tell. We don't have any information. So that's the nature of sometimes a collector will acquire something in this state or will put it in this state. Not 100% sure. But hey, so we have been doing a bunch of scanning Encyclopedia Britannica films for Encyclopedia Britannica. And we have found a life story series featuring slimy and gross creatures. And so this one is Life Story of an Oyster. Enjoy.
Shells have been found in ancient kitchen sites, indicating that men have been eating oysters for many thousands of years. Unlike the free-swimming animals of the sea, oysters are... How does a stationary animal like the oyster carry on its life functions? Actually, some natural oyster beds have been so reducing that in many places, oysters must be protected by law, like game animals. Fortunately, there are areas where oysters are still free for the taking. Because of the increasing demands for oysters, modern dredging equipment is used to scrape greater quantities of oysters from their natural beds on the ocean floor and from modified beds where they are grown more systematically. Like giant harvesting machines, These dredges bring back to the surface mature oysters that were planted 5 years before. Oyster fishing can be quite accurately described as oyster farming. Some 25 million bushels of oysters are harvested each year from American waters alone. Shucking, or shelling oysters, requires skill and strength. It takes force to open an oyster. In the United States, there are 3 different kinds of oysters. The eastern oyster is larger than the native western species, but similar in most other respects. However, at the same age, the Pacific oyster on the left is the largest of the 3. Oysters belong to a group of animals called mollusks. Two irregularly shaped shells protect an oyster's soft body. These shells are held together by a strong muscle. The inner side of the shell is lined with a smooth white material known often as mother of pearl. In certain kinds of oysters, this same material forms pearls. The oyster's body is covered with a thin, fleshy membrane called the mantle, which changes chemical substances in seawater into shell. How does an animal that never moves obtain its food? The mantle of the oyster is bordered with hair-like cilia that beat together in one direction, creating a current that carries water into the stationary oyster. This water is rich with microscopic plants, animals, decaying matter, and the bacteria that breaks it down. As this mixture of food and water passes through the mantle cavity, the gills extract oxygen from the water. The food particles carried by the ciliary current are trapped on the slimy surface of the gills. This mucus, loaded with food, is swept by cilia to the mouth. The reproduction of oysters is peculiar. In some oysters, fertilization takes place inside the oyster's body. In the case of this Pacific oyster, the female pumps millions of eggs outside its shell in a milky white spray. Sperms from a male oyster have also been pumped into the water in the same way. Though most of the sperms will never come into contact with the eggs, some will. Why is it necessary for the oyster to produce so many eggs and sperms? Once fertilized, the egg, or zygote, divides into 2 to produce a 2-celled embryo. Each cell divides again to produce 4 cells. Continued division results in a larva with cilia. The first 3 or 4 weeks of life is the only period in the oyster's life when it is a free-swimming animal. Soon, the hinge that connects the oyster's shell begins to form. Now the young oysters attach themselves permanently, here to an old shell, where they'll remain for the rest of their lives. Over a period of time, the oyster grows. As long as it survives, it continues to increase in size indefinitely. Here, a 5-year-old oyster is compared to a larger 30-year-old oyster. The oyster enlarges its shell to cover its growing body. New growth is visible on the outside edge of the brittle shell. The shape of an oyster depends upon where it lives. Oysters that live in the mud often are longer than oysters which cling to rocks. On the western coast of the United States, the low temperature of the water sometimes limits the reproduction of oysters. So commercial oystermen import young oysters, called seed, from Japan. During the journey, boxes containing the oyster seed are kept on the ship's open deck in order to better maintain a suitable temperature and to provide oxygen for their survival. Seed oysters are shipped on the empty shells to which they have attached themselves. A single shell has many young oysters attached to it. These shells will be taken to oyster beds and planted, as a farmer seeds a field. They can be planted in the muddy sand of shallow water as soon as the tide is in. About 500 bushels of oysters are shoveled onto each acre of prepared bed. Five years later, the oyster bed will be ready for harvesting. Like any other crop, oysters have natural enemies. Oyster beds are sometimes sprayed to kill the destructive sand shrimp. This shrimp digs tunnels in the sand under the oysters, gradually burying and suffocating the oysters. The oyster drill is also a threat to the oyster crop. It drills a small hole through the oyster shell and sucks out the soft meat. Flatworms, such as this, feed on young oysters. Sea stars also consume large numbers of oysters. And so does man. But through modern sea farming methods, based on biological research, there are more and more oysters. For many thousands of years, man has enjoyed eating this stationary animal. Are there other animals that spend their entire adult lives fastened in one place?
That's just how it ends. I'm over here at the computer typing in something. Before we get started here. Alright. Here I am. Yeah, so part of our slimy life story series, we did a snail, we did snakes, we did crayfish, so oysters. What other slimy thing haven't we done yet? Maybe we'll find an example of that. Anyways, so behind me, I have... let me set this and see if this works. No, oops. So it's a big reel here. I know how you guys are fans of TV commercials, so there's a bunch here, and and they're from the 70s, which is our favorite time, but they're all over the place as far as color. So why don't we give it a shot and see what's happening? Thanks for subscribing. Somebody who kind of followed what we did subscribed, and that's one way you can support us, is by subscribing or hitting the thumbs up button or smashing the like button or sharing it with other people that you say, hey, this is cool. You can also buy us coffee at ko-fi.com/abgeeks. or you can go to patreon.com/avgeeks and support us that way, which is kind of like a tip jar subscription service. So anyways, we're going to get started. The color is going to be all over the place on this, and I'll try to keep up, but it just might be what it is. So here's television commercials. Enjoy.
Charlie, this cannot be. It must be incredibly light. It's incredibly light. One must taste real cream cheese. And the strawberries, they are succulent.
Sara Lee Strawberry French Cheesecake. It's an international delight.
Charlie, I kill myself. But first, one more bite.
The spice on this was not good. Well, we'll run a couple of these and we'll see what happens. One second.
Who ate the Sara Lee? Who ate the piece that I saved for me? Who just couldn't resist? Who ate the Sara Lee?
Sara Lee all butter pound cake. Nobody can resist that flavor because we use fresh country eggs and whole milk and pure sugar and butter and butter and butter.
Nobody can resist Sara Lee.
Introducing Bird's Eye New England-style vegetables. Are they good enough to please even New Englanders? Listen.
Yeah, tasty, all right.
Tastes like my mother's.
It's good New England cooking.
That is good. With the string beans and the corn and broccoli. Those croutons put the final touch to it.
Try Bird's Eye New England-style vegetables.
The splices are very sticky, so it causes us to lose tension. So, yeah, we're gonna see what we can do. But in the meantime, let's learn about a dairy farmer. Enjoy.
Almost everywhere throughout the land, wherever feed crops can be raised or readily purchased, dairy cattle are found. Even in regions of the country where grass is scarce and water precious. For milk and milk products are part of the daily diet of almost every American. But some sections of the country are better suited to dairy farming than others. In areas where there is rolling farmland, best suited for pasture and hay, where transportation to large city markets is fast and economical, you are likely to find intensive dairy farming. More than 75% of America's dairy cattle are concentrated in a belt that stretches across the eastern half of the nation, in a region where the growing season is too short to produce more profitable cash crops. For more than half a century, dairy farming has been a major occupation in the upper western section of this belt. Although dairying methods vary from place to place, a farm in the dairy belt reflects many of the problems of the entire dairy industry. Most dairy farms today are owned and operated by a single family. Together, a father, his sons, and occasional hired help tend the cows and work the fields. But recently, a new kind of farm has appeared. A push-button farm, where one or two men, together with a sizable investment in modern machinery, do the work efficiently and profitably. This highly mechanized type of farm is part of a revolution that is occurring in the dairy industry. more than 360 acres of land, and a herd of 86 cows. These are the property of the Lawrence Hartman farm. Before him, Lawrence Hartman's father and grandfather owned and worked the same land. The Hartman Dairy Farm is modern. Tractors and trucks, harvesters, plows and planters help Lawrence and his father do most of the field work themselves, efficiently and profitably. To reduce his expenses, a dairy farmer must grow as much of the cow's feed on his land as possible. The Hartmans use modern methods like contour farming, planting crops in a pattern that cuts across the slope of the land. This prevents rain from washing both crops and topsoil away and makes every square foot of the fields productive. The work on a dairy farm varies from season to season, but one daily chore is the same throughout the year. Rain or shine, winter and summer, holidays and Sundays, the cows must be milked twice a day. Milking time is feeding time. Before the cows come into the barn for milking, set out hay, silage, and grain. In the milk house close to the barn, Mr. Hartman Sr. prepares the milking machines. The cows of this herd are called Brown Swiss. Other well-known dairy breeds are Holstein, Guernsey, Ayrshire, and Jersey cows. Each breed produces a special quality or quantity of milk. Cleanliness is a major concern of every dairyman. To prevent germs from getting into the milk, the cow's udders are washed with a disinfectant. Then the cups of the milking machines are washed in an antiseptic solution before they are attached to the cow. When Lawrence Hartman's father began dairying, each cow was milked by hand. Today, with modern equipment, the Hartmans are able to clean, feed, and milk more than 80 cows in less than 2 hours. To produce milk, a cow must first bear a calf. And there are always young calves on the Hartman farm, a new generation to add to the herd. There's a new generation of Hartmans on the farm, too. Brian and Rhonda are too young to do heavy work, but they are learning some of the chores that keep their father and grandfather busy from sunup to sundown. As milk is collected from each cow, it goes into a stainless steel container called a Sputnik, like the Russian satellite. Milk as it comes from the cow is warm and must be transferred quickly to a refrigerated storage tank or it will spoil. Most of the cooling and storage equipment on a modern dairy farm is run by electricity. If the power should fail, the entire day's output of milk might be lost. After milking, the cows return to pasture, and cleanup begins in the barn and milk house. Each piece of milking equipment must be clean and ready for use again next morning. Finally, time for supper. Few men in business work as hard as the dairy farmer, for even at the end of the day, there are chores to do. Like every businessman, Lawrence Hartman has paperwork, bills to pay, and books to keep. He keeps a record of the birth, illness, and production of every cow, notations on the yield and cost of each crop, along with the income from the sale of his milk. In spite of long hours, hard work, and many problems, the Hartmans are satisfied with their way of life. A few years ago, Lawrence Hartman considered leaving the farm to try a new career, but in the end, he stayed to carry on the family farm and the work that provides his family with a comfortable living. Bedtime? Brian's ready, but not his dad. There are few moments in the day that a dairy farmer can call his own. Even at night, there is usually some detail that requires attention. The slightest sign of illness in the herd must be carefully watched, for the health of the cow affects its output of milk, and in turn, the income of the farm. The cows in the Hartman herd represent an investment of thousands of dollars. It is only good business to protect this investment. As the sun rises, the chores of the day begin. Each structure on a dairy farm has a special purpose. Silos store chopped corn and feed. Hay is stored in the barn, and the milk is cooled and stored overnight in the milk house. Here, each morning, transportation to the market begins. The Hartmans sell their milk to processors, who pasteurize it and ship it to markets in the city. Since milk is highly perishable, it must be delivered to food stores quickly. That is why many dairy farms are clustered around large cities, where good highways provide rapid transport to the market. Besides grass and clover in the pasture, dairy cattle eat oats, hay, and corn. To raise these crops, work in the fields goes on throughout the year, except in winter. In the spring, plowing and planting. In summer and fall, cultivating, harvest, and storage. Most dairy farmers reap and thresh oats with a machine called a combine. In one operation, this machine separates the grain from the straw and the chaff. A trip to town is almost a daily event on the Hartman farm. The market town is only a few miles away. Although dairy farms are generally located some distance from urban areas, farm families need many of the same goods and services as city people. Small communities like this serve as shopping centers for farm families. There are stores and facilities similar to those in the city, like the supermarket, where the Hartmans buy their grocery supplies. Yes, even their milk and milk products. In dairy communities, farmers and town merchants depend on each other. When the farmers have little money to spend, local business suffers. Lawrence Hartman often travels to town himself, sometimes for a piece of equipment or to have oats ground at the local mill. This is one of many services available in town. In most dairy communities, you will find feed and grain suppliers, farm equipment dealers, and general supply stores. Here, dairy farmers meet to exchange views on everything from politics to sports, but more often than not, the problems of the dairy business. One problem that concerns most dairymen is growing competition from larger, more efficient mechanized farms. What does this mean to dairymen like Lawrence Hartman? All over the nation, farmers face a common problem: the need to produce more with less labor. To meet this need, some dairy farms have turned to mechanization. This ultra-modern dairy farm is run almost entirely by machinery. In this mechanized milking parlor, one man can milk the entire herd without help. Such farms are still few in number because they require an enormous investment in labor-saving equipment. Milk flows directly from cow to refrigerated storage tank automatically and efficiently. On this farm, even the land is used economically. Pastures are eliminated and the fields are devoted to feed crops instead of grazing. The cows are cared for in a small, well-planned enclosure where machines do most of the work once done by human labor. Some dairymen believe that this type of farm is the answer to the problems of dairymen across the country.
The biggest problem facing the dairy farmer today is the increased costs of operation. I today milk 88 cows and feed 88 cows and take care of 88 cows by myself through mechanization. The farmer, or dairy farmer, that doesn't change his operation and stays with the old methods, I don't think, myself, will be milking cows in the future for profit. The only person or anybody in the world that can operate a dairy farm without mechanization is the man that does it for a hobby. Today, the dairy industry, the dairy farm, is big business and must be operated as big business.
All dairy farmers share the common problem of holding down costs by working more efficiently. But Lawrence Hartman is equally devoted to his way of dairying.
Well, we're faced with the same problems of increasing costs, the need for greater efficiency, just like anyone else in the dairy industry. Now, automation may help in some areas to increase production per man. However, we find that automation is not the absolute remedy. We find here that we cannot separate the human element from our operation. Each cow is such an individual. She needs individual and separate attention. And by giving her this special attention, we're able to increase our production per cow and thereby improve our efficiency. We feel that the family farm is as much a way of life as it is a business. And as long as we can maintain this way of life, the family farm will never become obsolete.
Although their views on dairy farming differ, Lawrence Hartman and his neighbor face a problem that is common to farmers of every kind throughout the country. Scientific methods and mechanization have made our farms so productive that today fewer farmers are needed to produce the nation's food products. This abundance in farm production threatens the farmer with lower prices for his produce. Yet the costs of operating a farm are constantly rising. As a result, only the most efficient farmers can survive. No one can predict the future of the family farm. Yet one thing is certain: the working methods and the way of life of people in farming communities everywhere is rapidly changing. This is part of a revolution that affects us all. A revolution in production that is contributing much to our changing way of life.
I'm here. 1 second. Here I am. Yeah, so that was kind of fascinating. Not only did it talk about kind of what it's like to be a dairy farmer, but it also talked about the future challenges of being a dairy farmer, with increased automation and farms beginning to combine, and the value of the milk product going down because other competitors can provide it at a cheaper price. So all of that is something that we're looking at now when you have a consolidation of food producers and something goes awry, then suddenly you can't find that particular food. So for example, at a processing plant, if somebody is not keeping up or they don't think it's worth the energy to maintain hygienic practices, then stuff starts getting introduced into the food that's not good. So there's my little soapbox. All right, so the commercials didn't quite work because of the sticky splices. Basically, what happens is it sticks to the back of the film and goes pop, and then that kind of causes a tension issue, which makes the scanner stop. So hopefully we're going to not have to deal with that with this next film called Truck Transport on the Long Haul. Enjoy.
Trucks carry many of the things we need. This is a flatbed truck. It is pulling a flatbed trailer. This load of lumber will be used in building new homes. A special kind of truck carries automobiles from the factory to the automobile dealer. This truck is called an auto carrier. 5 automobiles. Other types of trucks are made to carry gasoline. These trucks are called tankers. This tanker will deliver gasoline to a filling station. This is a sleeper truck. It has 2 drivers. While one man drives, the other man sleeps. The sleeping compartment is behind the cab. Truck trailers are loaded at a truck terminal. This is a truck terminal in a big city. Small trucks pick up cargo from many shippers in different parts of the city. They bring this cargo to the loading dock at the terminal. At the truck terminal, the cargo is sorted. All cargo that is being put in this trailer is going to Spokane, Washington. Other trailers are being loaded with cargo for others. This trailer is parked at a loading dock of the terminal. The trailer is 35 feet long. This trailer is carrying many kinds of cargo. One shipper is sending canned foods. Another shipper is sending automobile parts. A third shipper is sending machinery and tools. The loaders are using hand trucks to carry the cargo into the trailer. This trailer is almost loaded. Soon, the large doors of the trailer will be closed. Truck tractors are parked in another part of the terminal. These tractors are ready to go on long trips. The truck drivers are carrying papers which tell each driver which tractor to use, which trailer to use, what the cargo is, and where it is going. This driver's name is Carl. When he gets into the cab of the tractor, he puts a chart in the speedograph. The speedograph records the speed of the truck and how far it travels. It also records the time at which the truck starts and stops. He also puts a chart in the tachograph. This instrument records the revolutions per minute of the engine. At the end of his day's work, Carl removes both charts. Carl drives the tractor to the filling station at the truck terminal. The attendant will fill the tank with diesel fuel. When the tank is full, Carl will sign a receipt for the fuel. is ready to pull the loaded trailer. A piece of machinery on the back part of the tractor connects the tractor and trailer together. These are the air hoses for the brakes on the trailer. Carl connects the air hoses to the front of the trailer. The battery in the tractor must be connected to the lights on the trailer. The small wheels under the front of the trailer are called landing gear. The landing gear holds up the front of the trailer when the tractor is not connected. When the tractor is connected to the trailer, its wheels hold up the front of the trailer. The landing gear must be raised out of the way. Now Carl tests the tires. By hitting them with an iron rod, he can tell if the air pressure is right. Drivers are trained to carefully check their tractor and trailer. They are responsible for the safe arrival of the truck and its valuable cargo. The tractor and trailer have been carefully checked. Everything is ready for the long haul. The truck driver watches for signs along the road. This sign says, all trucks stop at scales ahead. The truck will stop on the weighing platform. A highway officer reads the weight of the truck on a dial in the weighing station. Truck operators are careful not to overload their trucks. The truck will stop 5 times between Los Angeles and Spokane to change drivers and to refuel. Carl will drive the truck from Los Angeles to Fresno. The second driver will take the truck from Fresno from Redding, California to Chemult, Oregon. The fourth truck driver operates the truck from Chemult to Toppenish, Washington. And the last driver takes the load to the truck terminal in Spokane. It is about 1,200 miles from Los Angeles, California, to Spokane, Washington. Carl drives into the truck station at Fresno. He has been driving for about 7 hours. His day's work is done. Tomorrow he will drive a different truck back to Los Angeles.
Going up to check the oil, water, and tires.
This attendant helps to service the truck. He carefully washes the windshield. The truck driver must be able to see clearly at all times. Most truck tractors have diesel engines. A diesel engine is more powerful than a gasoline engine. The tractor needs a powerful engine to pull the heavy load. The attendant measures the amount of oil in the engine. He reads the amount of oil on the oil gauge. The gauge shows that the engine has enough oil. Now the attendant checks the water. He sees that the radiator needs water. He fills the radiator. The water in the radiator helps keep the engine from getting overheated. This attendant is filling the fuel tank. He watches the fuel gauge to tell how many gallons have been put in the tank. The fuel tank holds 80 gallons. The truck used 45 gallons of fuel between Los Angeles and Fresno. While the truck is being serviced, Carl will meet George, the second driver of the truck.
What happened? That's the nature of some of these films, is that one had a beginning, but didn't have an end. In the comments, you can tell what you think happened. Were they driving vials of nitroglycerin and had to go over a precarious bridge, like in Wages of Fear or Sorcerer? Or did they bring a lot of ice cream to hungry children at a orphanage? You know, you make it decide. This is a choose your own adventure. Although we're not going to say choose your own adventure because that is a trademarked thing and they'll bring the hammer down much later. So it's a pick a story that you like. Pick an ending that you like. Somebody wrote in the comments, do I like your jokes? I don't normally read comments while we're watching, but I like that you enjoy the films. Not every joke lands with me. And sometimes if it's a really, really bad joke, I like it better than a joke that's kind of so-so. It's okay. I enjoy that you guys are enjoying each other's company and the fact that we have 35 people watching. That's what I enjoy. And honestly, when I would show films live, people would be joking all the time, kind of in between. I would try to discourage people talking during the film, but people certainly would be joking to each other. And that's fine. That's processing. Because I think humor is the gateway of watching these films and appreciating them for what they are. Because I certainly got these films and thought they were amazingly corny, but now I see that there's a deeper purpose. Anywho, thanks so much for tuning in today. Very much appreciate you watching. And I think the kids that we're homeschooling are on summer vacation because I haven't heard anything from them. But I'm going to send them some stuff coming up. So if they're still watching, please know that I still love films and I still love letters about films and drawings about films. So everybody have a great rest of your day. Certainly enjoy showing films to you, and we will be back again tomorrow, Thursday, and we've got even more films to watch. I mean, it's crazy. Like, I don't know if you can see, there's like a big box with rolls and rolls of film there that we're going to be going through, and we're going to be watching them together. So everybody take care. Please rewind, love each other, and we will see you tomorrow.